because a lot of people have a lot of talent but don't have any emotional intelligence, so they self-sabotage, they don't know how to sell themselves, they don't know how to ask for help. So we're trying to move the humanity forward by helping people that are dealing with mental health issues to feel better. Another way is through my VC fund, which is called Symbiosis 25, which Alan, which is there, is also invested in. And we find brands. This batch is about fashion, so we are doing sustainable fashion for the Generation Z. So we find brands that already work in their local markets and then help them be global and digital. And what else? Like I do art with AI. I'm pretty much everywhere. I work with Constanza and AI 2030, which is an organization that is trying to push forward and connect academia, industry, and government to move AI forward in the world. So yeah, that's pretty much me.
That's it? Constanza.
Yeah, there we go. So, hi, I'm Constanza. So at C-Minds, what we do is we try to understand the social impact of exponential technologies, especially for emerging economies. So one of the questions that we've been asking, we're based in San Francisco, in Mexico City, and we have a new office in Jalisco. And one of the questions we've been asking the past few years is, this buzzword AI, that we see AI literally everywhere. Even any startup now says it works with AI somehow. Governments start to say, like, give me 5 AIs, starting to understand this potential of this new technology is one of the first transformations we've seen on the curious minds, both in Mexico and other countries in Latin America. However, one of the questions we've been asking as an organization that comes back to your question that what's happening in Mexico is that what does, in a pragmatic way, an AI strategy mean for a country? So what we've been seeing is a lot of developments in the 4.0 industry on companies advancing the use of AI and companies leading the development of tech on AI. However, what happens with the policy world? What happens with the social realm? What happens with a national strategy that includes the sum and the convergence of all of these actors coming together towards a coordinated way and transition that Mexico can take in this AI revolution? So a few years ago, actually too, we led the first development of the National AI Policy Report that was commissioned by the UK Embassy. UK, as maybe you well know, is one of the pioneer countries in AI and in AI policy. And they commissioned us together with the government to understand what was Mexico's potential in AI and how could a national strategy be pushed forward together with the industry, civil society, academy, and government. So we did this national policy where we interviewed tons of people from the ecosystem from all around to understand the opportunities and the risks for. And from there, the first strategy of AI in Mexico was born. This put Mexico as one of the first 10 countries in the world to have a national AI strategy. However, it was done in literally the last 3 months of the past administration. So as we well know about the risks of changing administrations, one of the perils that happened is that the AI strategy was kind of left behind, and we had to start almost from scratch, trying to understand what was the role of Mexico's institutions in this AI, in a new AI strategy. So one of the things that we formed as an ecosystem was a national AI coalition, because we're strong believers that any AI strategy that comes from a country has to be the effort of a coordinated strategy between sectors. And the first question we had to ask as an ecosystem is, what was the mechanism to collaborate effectively between sectors? What was a space where questions could be asked and answered could be found as a perspective of many? So this coalition right now is actually working with more than 130 participants from all over Mexico, and is actively working in 6 working tables that are led by the most important and prestigious institutions of Mexico from all sectors. And the question we are trying to answer as an ecosystem is how to create an AI strategy with the government. Actually, the government is leading 2 of the most important working groups, that answers the questions of A, how can Mexico accelerate the adoption of AI? 2, how can Mexico lead this adoption to answer the biggest questions of development, both in health, education, and other human rights issues? And 3, how can we mitigate risks? We will go, I think, a bit further on that, about the risks of AI. But I believe that there's a big potential for Mexico to understand how to define the ethos of AI for the country. And Mexico, being a leader in Latin America, has a really big opportunity to lead the way in what does it mean to have a coordinated strategy. Argentina, Chile, and Brazil are also working in AI national strategies.
So I organized an artificial intelligence conference in Mexico City. It's called RIA, Reunión Internacional de Inteligencia Artificial y sus Aplicaciones. It happens in August. And this came about because we saw a lack, more from the academic side originally. So the organizers, we were Mexicans gathered in the most important conference of artificial intelligence. Richie was there. And we were like, we should do a conference that tries to link that and bring the researchers and bring us and make the connections. And we also tried to gather the industry and the government. Constanza has been there. And we also give a summer school. And kind of the idea is, how do we, beyond adoption, also how do we make students be able to go to MIT and go to Google and go to Harvard, and how do we bring the people that are already there here? Because right now there's no place really there are several people doing research and several communities, but they are very not connected through the rest of the community. So I live in a bubble where there's a lot of money, and there's often people willing to give money to AI, and they care about Mexico, but they are completely disconnected. And so how to make those links, and that's why we organized a conference and bring international speakers. Last year, the Turing Award of 2019, Joshua Benjo, so he's the most cited computer scientist of 2019. He was in Mexico City giving a talk, and we're sponsored by Google and by Facebook and by a couple of the ones here, less, but.
Yeah, and that's a question. Even at last year's MITA TechTalks, we had a panel on startups doing AI, and we talked about the fact that those who are working in AI and trying to solve problems aren't talking to other startups that are working in AI, and sometimes the problems might be the same or similar, and how do you find responses? And as we mentioned, it's like, and I get pitch decks all the time where it's like we have AI, and I talk to them, and it's like they have nothing in it. They have 2 letters on their pitch deck, but they have nothing based on AI. So, but for the serious people working in AI. The company founders, the academics, the corporations that know they need to innovate. I mean, how can we bring them together? What have you found work successfully? Are there any things?
I think that's Yep, there we go. To say the truth, I think it's a very nascent conversation in Mexico for, as you say, individually, startups and companies are starting to grasp the potential and trying to figure out how to integrate these new technologies, machine learning and all that, into their business models. However, I haven't found a mechanism where knowledge transfer is effectively transferred between, startups. At least, we did a study actually that we just ended for Latin America. And as you said, one of the first things we did is we scraped the whole region. And we saw that more than 80% of the startups that said they were using AI, when we went in deeper, they were potentially thinking about using AI, or they were collecting the data sets. And one of the things they said is that they were lacking the mechanism to understand how to adopt AI in a more pragmatic sense, because the challenges, the data challenges, the access to the data points they needed, the privacy, all risks. Right now we're in a world where we're becoming more conscious of all of the risks associated with bias, for example, and they don't know necessarily how to move forward in what is an ethical use of AI. So I've seen that as a blockage. And at least in our experience, where we're focused in the use of AI for impact-led startups, we haven't yet seen a mechanism for knowledge transfer that is done effectively, not even in the region. But I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. Can I just interrupt? But globally? I mean, are there models in the UK or other advanced areas that could be replicated here?
Yes. Thanks. So I do want to ask a question. So I see two strategies. Like there's like, okay, let's focus on adoption and let's how do we tackle this directly to startups? An alternative that I see very near from my bubble is, which is what the Canadians were telling us that they did. So 25 years ago, Canada had a similar problem to ours, which is that like all of us live abroad, right? The three of us. So everyone was going away from Montreal and from Toronto and from Canada to the best US universities, and they had the problem, we want to retain the talent. And what they did was they invested a lot of money in two centers on AI from the academic perspective, like because they wanted to attract people that are doing their PhDs at MIT to return to that. And once it was a very established center academically, then it really became a hub full of spillovers because everyone was doing companies, and then Google wanted to have their headquarters, and Amazon and everyone. So how do you feel about, like, I've been wondering for many years as we've sometimes talked, couldn't we do that directly? Like, they spent like $100 million to invest in two centers in one topic, not investing everywhere in all the community. It's one center that it becomes a hub where really top talent are attracted to that, and then all of the spillovers happen. So I wonder whether that's a good strategy. And you were asking about strategies that have happened in Montreal and Toronto, which are some of the most developed hubs of artificial intelligence. That was the story that happened, and Joshua Benjo, the Turing Award, was telling us, that is what you have to do. Make a hub, academical, and then everything will circle around it. Like I would be attracted to come here, and then I have this conference, and I do other things, and those would be happening here. Maybe Richie would want to come and do his startups here.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very complex. So for example, I think the world. Okay. So we have government, industry, and academia, right? And then VCs like surrounding the thing. So in the side, like Constanza's work is really, really important. Like she's been very, very modest, but she's been pushing the development of a center for AI in Jalisco, and also which is also an AI 2030, and I would totally vote her president. So there's a lot of work done there. The thing is that the government doesn't understand AI at all. So it's really hard, like, to talk to them. Like, also, Campbell attempted to talk to the government with Joshua Benju there, and they didn't understand it either. So, but we all are working on that, right? Like, I know a lot of people who are working and trying to make the government understand that AI is important. Like, also Enrique Zapata and Yolanda Martinez helped us a lot on last administration. We even created, again led by this amazing woman, the sub-delegation of deep learning and AI in the Secretaría de la Función Pública. So every instrument that can be done, like we all been pushing to try and create it, but the thing is there is no continuity between governments, so it's really, really hard. So on the government side, we need continuity to try and make anything. Like, let's say we manage to make the center on this administration. How are we gonna make sure that they don't Inademos or what was it, Pro Mexico Us, right? Like, just cancel the whole thing. The other one is academia is full of ego. Yeah, the other one is academia is full of ego, right? So I go a lot with academics to talk, and it's impossible. Like, once I went to an event in WeWork that was from UNAM academics, and I've hung out with a lot of very top AI researchers around the world, and I offered to give a talk about my work, and they were like, yeah, but you don't have a PhD, and it was like, who the fuck? Like, I've done 3 times what you've done in your life in like 5 minutes, and you're like, just because I don't have a PhD, don't want me to give a talk. So there's full of ego, and it's really hard to talk to academics. We have the fortune to have like Enrique Azúcar and Miguel González and all the academics that are in, or Campero, who are in EI 2030, working with us, but there's a lot of groups internationally that it's very, very hard to convince them to like get rid of their models and accept new ways to function, right?
First of all, can someone get us some working microphones up here so that we don't have to keep passing them? Is government an essential part of the equation? Could it be a nonprofit or an entity? Because the way I look at it is AI crosses borders. I mean, there's no way to retain it inside of a border. So, maybe the conversation shouldn't be AI strategy in LATAM, but AI strategy for tech innovation. And do we have to have the involvement of government?
I do believe so, because part of the AI strategy is definitely working with prioritizing the efforts, right? Funding, for example, investigation, answering your question on the need for on the really pressing need for Mexico to have in my sense, I share the vision of having a national institute of AI that is led by the academy world that brings a hub together for these efforts. We see, and for AI ethics, we need the government to kind of regulate. I don't want to talk about regulations, maybe it's a step further in this conversation, but I believe in the power of multidisciplinary and multi-sector collaborations. And the government, and I do think there's some people and institutions in the government, Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores, the Foreign Ministry, is leading the conversations of AI in Mexico and abroad. I can talk about tons of examples for anyone interested specifically. The Ministry of Economy did Data Mexico, which is a hub for data on economic growth, which is the basis for the use of AI. And Secretaría de Función Pública are starting to question what can they do to activate again this motorized. There's one difference, and I'll end there with the government, that I see between the past and the present. It was a more consolidated effort with a national strategy for digitalization that led a unified vision for the country. And now, in our perspective, we feel it's pulverized in many different areas. So each area trying to figure out what is their intake in this question. And there's one effort I would like to put, because not everything is bad, actually. I'm the strong promoter of Mexico and its leadership in trying to understand how to implement AI for social development. And there's one effort which is, I think, significant, and actually there's people from Tec de Monterrey who are here. C-Minds together with Tec de Monterrey, together with the government of Jalisco. I don't know if you knew, but the government of Jalisco is one of the few governments from Latin America that has a director of AI within the government that is leading the AI strategy for the state. And I don't take this lightly, because the creation of an office that includes AI within the government is a big milestone by itself. And together with the Inter-American Development Bank, what we're doing is creating the first hub for AI that has to do with the responsible adoption of AI from the government side and from the entrepreneurial side. And the question we're asking is, how can the government itself be a key actor, not only in addressing the conversations and the strategy of AI, but also adopting the technology to have better social policies? What does it mean for a government that is leading with a population with diabetes, for example, one of the pandemic diseases in Mexico? What does it mean for a social infrastructure and a health policy to integrate the use of AI? For example, for a diabetic retinopathy, that's one of the most advanced cases. What does it mean to have systems for school abandonment prediction that are using the data that the government has to be able to create better tools for the government to take better decisions? And that is just starting. Actually, next month we're going to have the official launch. And Monterrey has also starting to have really important initiatives on AI. Yucatan created the State Center for AI. In a sense, and to sum it there up, I do believe they're crucial for the conversation. I do believe we need more people outside of the government pushing the ecosystem forward and believing that the way forward is through collaboration. And 3, there are actors such as Enrique Zucar, he's a National Science Prize of Mexico a few years ago, which is leading together with people from MIT and peers such as Andres and Ria, the proposal for the development of a national AI institute, which will bring, I believe, together the ecosystem into specific points of action.
So, let me push back a little bit, or maybe just complement. There are alternatives that do not go through the government. So a very concrete example that's really amazing, but at the same time sad, because not doing that, is Africa. So right now, the best masters of artificial intelligence in the world is in Africa, and it's sponsored by Google and Facebook. And they were able, I mean, Africa is even more complicated than Latin America in terms of how to deal with the governments and all of that. And like private guys from Google, like Mustafa Sise, who's a great researcher, and then he decided, I'm gonna push for this. And what they do in these masters is they fly the best people around the world. If you look for Masters in Artificial Intelligence Africa, you'll see this, the instructors are like really the best people in the world, and they are all willing to go for like 1 week or 2 weeks and teach there. And it's expanding. So 2 years ago they had like 30 people in one place. Now they have 5 campuses that they just opened. And I was just doing an internship at Facebook AI Research. There are like 6 research scientists, and there were 3 interns. One was me, that I'm doing a PhD at MIT. And then these 2 guys were coming from that masters. They had never left Africa, so it really like pushed them forward. Right now, there's no AI research center from Google or Facebook anywhere in Latin America. There are many in US, there are in Europe, and there are in Africa. And there's so I do think that, and that's, if you ask me in 10 years what's going to be the most important thing in Africa that yielded to a more developed AI ecosystem is going to be that.
I believe Google is looking at putting an AI research center in Mexico City. But there's so many questions, and I know we're running out of time. But one that I want to ask, that I think one of the reasons that a lot of starting companies put AI and they are thinking about it, how to implement AI, but they don't have it yet in practice, is the lack of talent and the lack of qualified people to implement AI or to help execute on that vision. How do we encourage more students? How are we working in early education? Because I believe, especially here in Mexico, you really need to start that thought process early on at almost the elementary school level, so that people have a path toward where they're going. But how are we exciting our kids to learn more, and how do we cultivate more talent? And
hello. There you go. Okay, yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So there's a very common joke. I don't know if you heard about it, U.S. people, that you put like Japanese or whatever developed country crabs you want in a bowl, and then you put like something on the top to cover the bowl, and they manage to get out. But then you put Mexicans in a bowl, and you don't need to even put a lid because they pull themselves back there. And it's a very common joke. So I think there's a step in human evolution before even thinking about technological or whatever evolution. So my best friend Corral and I are presenting an art piece in the Tulum Art With Me art show, which is kind of presented like a new religion called Coralismo. And it's kind of making a new Jesus that is like an Instagram influencer, right? And it's art, like don't get offended if you're religious. But the core principle is that in a coral, which is like a living structure where fish live, and you have like plants giving food, and then like fish coming, and then like those fish help other fish like to find food if they can't, and then the particles they leave are absorbed by other parts of the coral. So corals are like very, very well-structured ecosystems, and we ourselves as humans are corals, right? Like we are a living group of cells that has inside a lot of bacteria, and that bacteria is living in us, and it affects our mood, and there's a lot of research on microbiome and stuff. So we're proposing like living like if we were in a huge coral, which is the Earth. It's a lot more about sustainability. But the core principle is that sometimes you lead and sometimes you follow. And it's very important to learn when to lead and when to follow, right? So I think that is the principle that is going to take us forward. And we're presenting as an art piece, but I leave you just with that small principle, right? Like sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. So for example, Constance is a person I follow a lot. But if we need to go to, for example, we're doing a project in education, So trying to improve the teachers' education on how to use tech inside classrooms with UNETE, which is an organization, an NGO for education. And there I lead, right? Like, it's like, let's do this model, let's do it like this. But if she tells me we need to go talk to the UK on how to do one strategy, then I follow her. Lean the same thing, right? Like, or Adan, like, sometimes we have to follow people to make things better. And sometimes we have to be the ones that propose and move things forward, right? So if we follow this principle in our lives, I think we can make a better world easily.
I'll add two things on your question on, there you go. I'll add two things on the question you said about talent. And it's two I think, it's not risks and opportunities. One is that talent is really expensive. So it's a barrier for startups to have access to this qualified talent. And what we're seeing as reports and our investigations with the ecosystem is that they're fighting, there's no way to fight the big companies on talent because of, you have the maternity leave for 9 months, for some companies you have, all of the perks, the M&M's free, all around. But rather that, the payment for this talent, there is a non-compete there. And second, I ask myself right now, with all of the visa challenges in the United States, how could Mexico become a hub for talent on AI? That is right now, that could be a source of AI talent for other regions of the world. And to that, there's one example of Jalisco that they had a special visa. I don't know if it still exists, but it existed in last administration, about the tech visa. So what they did was to provide access to mainly people from AI, from machine learning and the AI ecosystem from Silicon Valley, access to come and live in Jalisco with this special visa that was activated in a really fast way. And it started to create a hub of people interested in living in the wonderful weather and the low costs and the high paychecks because they were paid from other states. So I put on the table the need for Mexico to become a place where we can host this ecosystem, and that and the replicative effects of having international talent in Mexico would be amazing. Second, the fiscal incentives for companies to be able to attract talent to their company is something that we have to talk as an ecosystem in Mexico. There's no fiscal incentives for companies, especially small companies, the pymes, to be able to adopt this technology on plenty of sites. And third, and I'll finish there, is also the need to invest in these mechanisms from the industry and the academia to have a more effective talk on what are the AI trends and what are the industry needs to be able to adopt education to the needs of companies that are changing so fast.
Well, I could keep this going like all morning long, but I know that we're short on time. We're a little bit late, and we have someone waiting on video for us too. Yes, Jill, but
can I ask a question?
No. No, I'll tell you what. I have questions too. I have questions about how much influence do the big tech giants have. I have a lot more. But I'll tell you what, we do have a workshop today on AI. So all three of you will be participating in the workshop and on implementing AI. And then we'll have some more conversations throughout the day, but I just want to try and keep this on time. I would love to have your question answered, but maybe we could do it in the break. So thanks so much. Let's thank our panelists. Got some great minds in here.
C that represents curiosity, one of the words, collaboration, another. And,
oh, love that. Okay, thanks so much. Andreas.
Okay, so now we're going to do something a little different. My father and business partner, Claude Smadja, could not be with us. He's a political analyst. And this is your break from AI this morning, because we're going to talk about US-China decoupling. So this is how we're going to do it. Since we don't trust technology that much, we had him